I think we're going to
Yep.
be running out of material in 30 minutes.
Yeah, those are famous last words for us.
Bruh.
All right. Welcome to the Johnny Random Show. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into Ukraine, the history and the future of it as we can from thousands of miles away with limited information. And we'll do our best to try to go through some of the information, relevant points on how we got here, and talk about what we think, could happen in the future. So this will be my take on how we got here. We'll start with Russia and Ukraine used to be one thing many years ago. As far as the people, the group of people used to be one group of people, and then over time, that was sort of founded, or the capital of this group of people was in modern day Kiev or Kiev. And so today I need to restart. I feel like I'm absolutely
not super fluid, huh?
No. And actually, I have a different take I want to take. Actually, I just kind of realized in the middle of saying that I kind of want to do a different thing.
Why start way back in the 800s?
Yeah, I don't really want to do that. That's why I kind of do this, but no. Okay. All right. So, hi, and welcome to the Johnny Random Show. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the Ukrainian invasion. So today, when we're recording this, it is February 26th, and I have a couple of things that I need to confess. I did not think that there would be an invasion. I thought it could be an invasion, but I was on the record saying that I didn't think that there would be an invasion. So I am going to go ahead and admit. And I want to point out that there are plenty of things that I have learned in the last few days since the invasion started earlier in this week that I was not aware of, that I was not tracking, that people weren't really talking about, that added a lot of insight that would have been helpful to know when I made that prediction that I didn't think Ukraine was going to be invaded. And with a lot of that knowledge of what putting some of the pieces together on Ukraine, I want to, again, in this deep dive, kind of explore some of those things where in the past, maybe what I thought was right, and then what I, now have learned, and what I think that means for the future. And then we'll bring in the whole panel, and when I originally said that I didn't think the invasion was going to happen, I did not know, and I have since not heard a lot of people talking about the Budapest Agreement, that where Ukraine essentially gave up its nuclear arms in, I think, 1999. I could be off 94. A year or two. 94. Okay. Mm-hmm. I knew it wasn't going to be exact on that. And I didn't know that was a thing. And I didn't know they gave up their nuclear weapons in exchange for protection from Russia and from the United States. And that, I haven't heard a lot of people talking about that as a factor, but I think that certainly plays a factor in how things are going today. Also, I will admit that I am highly skeptical of the United States intelligence, what do you call them, deep state, and just whatever they tell, put out as information. I view it as how I view many things in the media, as, okay, I see you're saying that and you have an agenda. What is the agenda behind it? And so I'm looking for the agenda, and I'm not always quick to take the intelligence agencies at their word, and I will not change that just because they got it right. I think, sometimes a clock is, broken, once every Thursday, twice. So
what?
But I will admit that it was they were telling, essentially the truth, or they were basically, right with that there was going to be an invasion. Now, were they saying that and they didn't even believe it? I think possibly in their response, there could be an indication that might be the case, and we can defend that going forward. So just a little bit of of how we got here, just in case you're not following this super close, and you may be watching this in the future. So I'll just sort of bring you up to where we are on Monday. I think Monday there was Ukraine, Putin, I can't pronounce it, the other region of separatists. He declared those independent states and then used that as a pretext to go into those regions and say under the pretext of liberating them. I assumed at that point that, wow, okay, he invaded and we didn't do anything except for offer some sanctions. So Putin essentially won. That was my take on it at that time. Now, I thought that it would pretty much stop there. And then he mounted a full-scale invasion on the rest of the country, sort of shock and awe. There's some crazy videos that you can find of some really heartbreaking and tragic videos, actually, that you can find. Shows how devastating war can be. We are in, guys, correct me if this is wrong, day 3. I think we just finished day 3 of the invasion. Right now, Kiev has not fallen, and Zelensky is still the president. He is given out weapons to all the citizens and said, stand up and fight. And there's been countless acts of heroism. There was the Marine who rigged explosives on the bridge and couldn't get himself out, and he knew that and basically blew himself up. But that slowed the advancement of the Russian army and set them back, and is largely the reason why probably Kiev is still standing today, just buying extra time. There's surprising to me, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, is even though it was a pincer move where all sides were surrounded, Russia is not just rolling tanks across and just taking everything. He's paratrooping people in, he's taking out air bases, he's being strategic. And it looks like the strategy is to take Kiev and kill Zelensky, probably remove him at least, and jail him and install a puppet government. And where we go from there, who knows? But that looks like, and I just will have to say again, I didn't predict any of this very much. I hadn't given a whole lot of thought to what, even though I said it was kind of a flip of a coin, I really didn't truly think that it would happen, and at least not at this fast, I would have to say. So that's my take on how at least I got here at this point, and some of the things that I learned along the way. And like I said, if there's some videos that you want to learn on some, the history of Ukraine, there's countless videos on YouTube right now. Just look for any of them. They all will pretty much give you very similar lines of thoughts on why Putin is doing what he's doing. And we're going to talk about those things, but we're going to operate from an assumption, because I don't want to take a long time on going through all the history, but I'm going to have knowledge on NATO, Ukraine, and at least some knowledge on it, and then we'll go from there. So guys, anything you learned in the last week that wasn't on your radar? If you're bold enough to admit, like I was, that you were wrong on your estimation of what was going to happen, or if you were just right all the way along, love to hear that too. So go ahead, Matt, because I think we were talking earlier and you had something.
Yeah, there was things I was right and wrong on, and good reasons for both. I really did think that Putin was not dumb enough, but bold enough to actually attack Ukraine. I was right about that. And I was giving it about a 70-30, 60-40, somewhere in that range, probability that he would attack. What I thought was going to happen, most likely scenario, was that nobody was going to support Ukraine. Ukraine would go down fast. Two things changed, like forked from that I didn't foresee. For one thing, if he had taken Ukraine, there's a good possibility that if he just went ahead and took the Ukraine, that because of the camaraderie between the Ukrainians and the Russians, as far as their national origin, they're from the same people group, the Slavs, because of their history, it would be seen as something that was untenable. I didn't think about that. I'm sure Putin did, and that's probably why he took the more cautious approach of trying to put in a puppet government. But I would say that even he underestimated the resolution of the Ukrainian people. Big Dad, you're muted. Okay. So at any rate, I would say that I was probably right about what would have happened had Russia used a total war tactic like Hitler did, where when he went into a place, he went through mercilessly, you know. But because Russia did not take that tactic, they're not going to make that 2-week deadline. If they suddenly were to actually do that, they could probably make a 2-week deadline and they would have a victory. But I think the reason Putin didn't choose that was because it's really not a viable long-term solution for having Ukraine. He's got to maintain the image that he's installing a better government, because that's the reason that he was able to keep Crimea in the first place, is because he said that even though Russia agreed to the current geopolitical borders of Ukraine, that that agreement was to the legitimate government of Ukraine, and so this coup, he could just dismiss that promise to them. So he's got to maintain the illusion that he's there to enforce real, legitimate government of Ukraine that is fair to all, including all the Russians that are supposedly oppressed. So at any rate, I didn't understand the depths of that situation, and I don't think he did either.
Yeah, anything caught you by surprise, Paul?
The speed was a little surprising. That Putin invaded wasn't really a surprise. But how quickly it happened. I know that we've bounced around some videos for the four of us to look at, and I'd post those in the show notes for other people to see, because a lot of those are going to be underpinning for some of my comments later in this episode, and probably other people's as well. But I'm not surprised he did it. I was a little surprised with how quick he did it. I'm glad that the people of Ukraine there are some that are attempting to resist. I get why people are leaving and running away. And yeah, that's the answer I have for the question.
Yeah. Dad, anything surprise you on this last week?
I think the thing that surprised me is the number of Russians killed. I saw something yesterday along the lines of 2,800. They had an invasion force of 200,000, maybe.
Yeah.
So we're getting up there around 1% or something, more or less. That seems like a large number to me to lose. Saw some videos and things concerning, 80 tanks taken out and different things along the line, which again surprised me, because I think in modern warfare, I think the military advantage they have, again, Ukraine might be tougher stuff than we think. And I guess maybe a lot of that is because it was the place where weapons were developed or housed or different things along that line. So, there's still a lot, unknown, but I think it's a lot more, it was a lot more costly than I thought it would be to them. Because I thought, like a lot of other people, he was going to take the two, the two areas that he said were, protecting Russians. which Hitler thing, and do kind of what Hitler did, take over those places, and then you sit there for a little while, and everybody kind of thinks that they're going to get attacked, and they're not going to get attacked, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're ready, they got everything set up. But the thing is, logistically, these days, it doesn't take much to get ready and to move troops. And he's been planning for a while. So, but it did surprise me that he didn't kind of stop first. And there was a little bit of a pause, but then it was like, keep rolling. So that was kind of a surprise there.
I think we're all surprised by the pace. Sounds like, and some of the fact that Russia just didn't destroy them utterly, like Ukraine off the face of the planet. It seemed like that there was that numbers imbalance, and the fact that Biden made it very clear from the beginning. Americans aren't going to be fighting in Ukraine against Russians. We're going to be supporting NATO allies and sending weapons and things like that too. Close by, staging for Ukrainians to go train and then go back and fight against them. But I saw, I'm impressed by the Ukrainians. What is it? Ghost of Kiev or something like that. Do you guys see that? That was fantastic. I think he shot down 5 Russian jets, just one plane, just flying back and forth, just shooting them down. I mean, the guy is like an ace, like from, old days. Like it's awesome. That Marine person, the engineer that we talked about earlier, those 13 guys on the planet, goodness gracious, on the island, Rock Island, whatever it was, Snake Island. Yeah. It was like, should we tell them to go F themselves? And then he's like, yeah, say it. Go after yourself. Those guys are dead, but like the fact that the recording goes out has to lift morale. The fact that they're passing weapons in Kiev, and every hour that the Russians delayed on taking Kiev was more time to get weapons in the hand of civilians. And if you're talking about if you're a Russian guy, soldier walking through the streets, and any building can shoot at you at any moment, you just stay in your vehicle the whole time. It's not a pleasant experience for the Russians, the invading forces. I've even heard that there's been some overheard conversations of Russian troops like, why are we even here, man? Like, what are we doing? There's reports that Russian troops didn't even themselves expect invading, and it was kind of a surprise to them. And then I want to say to the fact that I think it looks like Putin's trying to, I still maintain a little bit, even though in my infamous now, at least in my eyes, Putin's a bad boyfriend or whatever. I made the prediction that Russia wouldn't invade. But even though he is a bad boyfriend and he did come in the house, risking the, crazy uncle on the porch, whatever, my analogy there, even though he did, come in the house, I think that there's still some, I'm not going to destroy the house. I'm not going to, take your phone away. I think that probably Russia has the ability of shutting down some of the access that they have to getting these social media things out. As far as like taking the power out, choking the source of, the energy, supply lines, all those things, because I do think that he's trying to, in a weird way, maybe in his weird dictator, mind, thinks that he can still win Ukraine's heart, and that if he's not so brutal in the takeover that, that they'll accept him. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that.
I think that's what he thought yesterday.
And maybe not today. And I think that he might have a change of strategy, and we can talk about that. But what do you guys think on the theory for why it's going this direction? Anybody have thoughts on it?
You do have kind of East-West split, because the Eastern Ukraine tends to see Russia more as a savior and an ally, and the Eastern Ukrainians tend to have an affinity with their Russian counterparts across the border. The Western Ukrainians, not so much. They tend to think of themselves Ukrainian and European and not Russian. India, as we bounced back and forth, there was some discussion about
Yeah.
language as one of those things. Eastern Ukrainians tend to speak Russian more than Eastern Ukrainians tend to speak Russian more than Western Ukrainians, and Western Ukrainians tend to speak Ukrainian a little bit more in terms of percentages. But clearly in Western Ukraine, there's not really a big, yay, let's have Russia, or let's be part of Russia. In the East, it's, from what I've heard, it's not quite. They're more willing to see Russia as.
Yeah.
Looking at those statistics, again, there were several statistics and polling, pre all of this, where Ukrainians felt towards Russia and a number of different things there. And the surprising thing that I saw was the large percentage of Ukraine, both East and West, wanted independence. The East was being more pro-Russian because they spoke Russian and that type of thing. And some of that early history is that, different groups of people, Russian people, were moved into that area, and some of the people in that area moved out. It's kind of the, the Babylonian and Assyrian thing, where we move people out and move other groups in to bring about their Russianization and that type of thing. So that's happened there. And so there's certainly that. But over a period of time, even though you've moved people into there, they begin to identify with the land, and this is my country. You move people from the South into the North for jobs. The first generation is Southern, waving the Confederate flag, the whole deal. A couple of generations, that's not a big deal. I mean, you have, Grandpa was, a Southerner and moved up here to work in the factory, and the same seems to be. Again, I might be reading into it, but those numbers look pretty large to me as far as just the country as a whole, considering themselves Ukraine, even though they have this language tie and heritage and things. They didn't seem to be real keen on being joined back again. I mean, again, I don't know the famous saying, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. It's how you measure things, what the question was. But it seems from the statistics that I saw, that it wasn't a clear, like, everybody east, of side of Ukraine was going, let's go back to the mother country.
I will say,
in that way. And I'm guessing why,
So there's some similarities between Ukraine and Russia and the UK and America with the War of 1812. With the war, by the time 1812 came around, it was about 30 years after independence, 20 some odd to 30 years, right? And Britain thought they could just take back America. Well, America at that point had formed a national identity only 30 years later, separate from the British, that they really underestimated, severely underestimated. If they had actually managed to occupy the entirety of the United States at the time, they still would have had terrible riots, and it probably would have had another Revolutionary War on their hands in a short order, because the American identity had been formed as something separate from the British identity. And that's what the I think, to certain degrees, there's this parallel in what Russia is underestimating. The Russian people and the Ukrainian people have an affinity for each other. There are Russians in Ukraine and Ukrainians in Russia. You know, there's an affinity for each other, but there's a different national identity, and there is a need for that independence that Russia has plainly understated.
I thought I heard something interesting, and I cannot place where I heard this, but I in the Donbass regions that Russia annexed were excited because yay, we're coming part of the motherland, at least the freedom fighters, whatever that Russia had acknowledged. But then when Russia invaded the rest of Ukraine, that the people of that region are like, wait a second, you were supposed to take us out of that. And now if you establish a puppet government, you're leaving us in Ukraine. And so there's sort of they see themselves as Russian and Ukrainian as other, but Putin, their leader, is seeing Ukraine as Russian. So it's sort of this weird dynamic that some of those people sort of betrayed in a weird way. And that's one thing that has really struck me is like, the more you look into a country and the history of that country, the more you realize, like, if we hadn't grown up in America and know the history of the Civil War, the nuances of the North and the South, the Democratic and Republican Party, how all of these things work together, the immigration over the years and how that has played out, religion, it's more regionally important to certain places, different things. Like, we understand our culture and our history very well because we're Americans. They have their own history and culture, and I was getting a very surface level interpretation of, well, the East is more Russian, and the West is more Ukrainian, so this is how that's going to play out, where there's a lot more complexity on how these things work out. And I think that there is somewhat of it. Even the people in what Eastern Ukrainian, like you're saying, have some national identity of being an Eastern Ukrainian and what that means. And it's more Russian, but is it all Russian? And you might have sympathies, but when tanks start, and missiles start shooting over your head, you're not coming here peacefully to liberate us. How real does that get? How much did Putin just shock the people that were sympathetic to him in his own country, in Russia, and the people of Ukraine? I don't think that he's going. I think that there's going to be repercussions to that. And, and we found that out when we invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. It's easy to invade and roll tanks in and shock and awe. It's much harder to occupy. And he's going to have to deal with that. And, and this is something that, I don't know. And I debate this in my head, how much, because I hear people, they're afraid. Oh no, World War III is starting. And part of me is going like, I mean, it's a war in Ukraine, and it's not really some gas prices, increase our inflation, stuff like that. I mean, it's not going to be great for us here. Obviously, it's not going to be great for people of the world. We might take some refugees and stuff like that. But like, as far as like actual, need to, fight and things like that, and will anything come to America? That's not really been on my radar. But the more I think about this, someone made a comparison to how World War I and World War II both started, and when dictators get on a roll, so to speak. And what are people, pre-war, you don't want war, you do everything to avert war. But when someone's gonna fight and take land from people, how do we let him take Finland? Do we let him take Sweden? Because I saw reports today that he was making accusations that Sweden and Finland don't need to ever think about joining the European Union, or else there's going to be consequences there. What does that mean? Moldova has a population of Russian speaking population as well. Is he going to say that they deserve to be in the motherland? as well and declare them free and then occupy there? I mean, what is when is he gonna stop? And that's where I don't
When he
know. I
runs out of
mean,
soldiers.
when he runs out of soldiers, yeah, but when do we I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm saying like, is this a test to see how this works if he can truly occupy Ukraine and stop, or is there something after this? Do you guys think? And what is this? You know, the biggest thing that I always said from the beginning is if Russia invades Ukraine, what is that message does that send to China? And does China take the Spratly Islands and then want the whole South China Sea and the Taiwan and the Philippines and what wasn't Vietnam at one time controlled by at least North Vietnam controlled by China? It's where does this go? And does Kim Jong Un Il, which one is in charge right now? So irrelevant right now, but still,
Kim Jong Un.
Kim Jong Un, yeah, but he's got a nuclear warhead, and what if does he shoot it at Japan? Does he shoot it at South Korea? Does he shoot it at the U.S.? Does he test and come really close? Like what happens when dominoes start falling? That's truly my greatest fear. And I don't know. I guess I'm of two minds. I think China always has the long game, right? They did that with their economy, plan on how to have economic domination, the long game. They have that mindset. But what Xi Jinping has stated that he wants basically to be the number one power, and he wants Taiwan back. Well, what does being the number one power mean? Like, what if Europe starts kicking into gear because of this Ukraine invasion? And I certainly think it will. I think that they're going to take some, ownership of their own defense, and they're going to beef up their economies and try to insulate as much as they can. I think Russia is trying to be a stronger power, and assuming, that, and this is where I'm looking 5 years into the future. If Russia becomes more of a power because they have Ukraine and the resources of Ukraine, and Europe has become more of a stronger power, and because of the Cold War II that we're in, United States has to respond reciprocally, and we're kind of in this standoff, and then China has to assert its dominance too. And then you have, instead of a bipolar world, you have a multipolar world with a lot of different people with a lot of nuclear weapons. It just feels like the world gets really dangerous and goes on knife's edge at that point. So and again, I want to play out to the worst case scenario, because to me the worst case scenario was what just happened in Ukraine, and I didn't see that coming. So now I'm thinking about what's the worst case scenario, and I don't know if I'm just overreacting to that. I mean, I certainly don't think it's going to be by this summer where we're going to be in World War III. But I mean, next year we could be in a really precarious spot where, dictators start expanding. What do you guys think of that? Any of that sound reasonable or far-fetched?
Yeah,
Dad,
I think it always is reasonable, because countries look out after their own interest, their own people's interest, and things along that line. So you always look for where things are weak, and it's the it's kind of sad in the sense, we tend to look out for ourselves. Our government does it in the worst possible ways. So we've done this too. I mean, we look at what we helped Afghanistan fight the Russians and bog down the Russians and that kind of thing. We supplied information, guns, all kinds of things for them. So does Russia now do everything that it can to weaken us? Of course. Does China do the same thing? Are they looking for opportunities? Of course. that is man, it's going to be there, and we should expect it. I mean, we shouldn't be so naive as to think that it won't. The thing with Germany moving arms into Ukraine via Poland, I see Russia trying to stop that from getting there, and that will involve the people that are trying to get those in, and whatever personnel, whether it's military, whatever kind of things. That's going to involve Germany. It's going to involve, if they use Poland as a entry point. The worst case scenario is definitely there. It depends how it's perceived on both sides. I hate to say it, the best case scenario is just Russia crushes Ukraine in the next 24 hours and nobody has a chance. I hate to say that, but that would be least likely to escalate anything.
I don't know about that, just because I don't know. I would have said the exact same thing before he invaded the rest of the country, because I made the calculation that Ukraine is what he wanted. Now I'm not so sure what he wants. Does he want to put the old USSR back together? And which Ukraine is the crown jewel. And that's like the biggest win you could have. You already have Belarus, that's like basically, an ally. You don't have to invade an ally because they, whatever. These other countries, you weaken the, credibility over time, and then you're able to, kick them out of NATO, and you scare all these other countries, and you assert dominance in the area. If that's his goal, then yeah, I think what you said, that's probably the best case scenario. Is he trying to unite the Russian Empire pre-Soviet Union, where Poland and basically the idea behind the empire was that you basically dominate in a more, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, exactly how I'm trying to say it. So I'm just sort of muddling around, but I think I hope I'm conveying at least the point. There's two different scenarios. One is like a wild dictator that wants to do, is more like what you would imagine, world domination, Dr. Evil, who he's going to, no one will stand in his way, and he's going to do whatever it takes to bring down countries and fold them into the pack. The other is a more diplomatic and yet scary, an awful thing, but it's more predictable, because he's trying to put USSR back together. So, we know what the USSR was, so you can kind of see where that goes. I don't know if that makes sense. Hey, you see what I'm saying? I don't know.
You're muted, Dad.
A thought came to me that, the reason that there's so many bullies in the world is because it works.
Yeah.
It absolutely works, because it takes a lot for somebody. Well, it takes somebody standing up to a bully.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary. Bully is a bully because they're generally big or loud or something, whatever their advantage there. So position, all of those things. So man, you just don't know what to predict, to say right now that, no, I don't think he's going to take anything after that, who knows?
But I think from a geopolitical and strategic standpoint, you have to know, or at least guess, at what your enemy is going to do, right?
Why did he do this to begin with?
Right, yeah, because if we're going to deter him from future expansion, we have to know what he's likely to expand to. Is it Russian Empire, or is it Soviet Russia? Which one is it? And I think that, like I said, I think it was Soviet Russia in my previous assessments, but now I'm leaning more towards the way he's acting as if it's more of Russian Empire
Right. Well, I mean, what you have
and
going
so
on your
that's why
side is the fact that
I
he
get more
has taken
worried.
3 countries. This will be the third country.
Yeah.
That he has
Yeah.
reestablished dominance over. Um, so yeah, you'd say from the pattern of where we are now, past behavior, you know,
Right.
is a predictor for, present reality. Um, is that, yeah, he'll go further. I mean, you have to make that assumption that that it wasn't about NATO being
Yeah.
right on his border.
That's
That it was long. Um, he
that's
planned on taking it
that's
earlier by putting in public government and things. The Ukrainians rebelled against that. Now he's going to do it by force. The question is what has he got working in the other countries? And again, from our perspective here, we don't know because it's not even on our radar yet. But it should be on somebody's radar. What's going on in those other governments? Are they pro-Russian? Are they being, manipulated? Or is he got people in those places? That would be kind of another indicator too. Oh no.
we need to do a deep dive episode on Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan. I mean, we'd have to really be able to understand what might actually happen next, and we'd have to look at Putin's relationship to each country and how he views each country to really. I mean, this got a lot more complicated than I was expecting. But Paul, did you mention anything on World War III before we move on? Because I have another thought.
No, I do want to throw in something that hasn't been brought up. Fascism is alive and well in Europe. We got rid of Hitler. We got rid of the Nazis. We did not get rid of fascism. It's the last 10 or 15 years, it's been a growth. Fascism and communism don't play well together. Fascists and communists hate each other. There were certainly strategic military reasons for Hitler to go to attempt to get to Moscow and shut Russia down before he went after the rest of Europe. But there's also a deep hatred of communism. And even in Mein Kampf, a lot of his arguments against communism are actually not wrong. His solutions are all wrong, but his arguments against communism are not wrong. And I would imagine there are comments against fascism that are not wrong. But so some of what's at play here is an ideological struggle. And yes, it's Putin wants power. Putin has it in his head that all native Russians, all Russian-speaking people, all people that he thinks should identify as Russian should live under the protection of the Russian government. And that's a driving motivator for Putin. But it's also a deep hatred of fascism. I actually took some notes. I've never prepared so much for a podcast episode and yet felt so unprepared and ill-informed. But
yes,
let's not let that get in the way of some fantastic moral and political commentary that I'm about to throw down.
Okay, that's the theme of the show. That is the theme of the show. We don't really know everything.
We don't know anything.
Not going to stop us.
Yeah. So there's a real high possibility that there are no good players in this scenario. The victims are the people of Ukraine. The government, not so much. The people that the governments of Ukraine and Russia are going to use as pawns in this, those are the people that are the victims. And if we don't carefully consider how we respond, and the response is crafted such that the players at fault are the ones that are feeling the pain, and the people that are being victimized here are feeling some relief, or at least see some hope for relief. Um, we will see World War III in 10 to 12 years.
Wow. Matt, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to skip you, but did you also have World War III thoughts
Yeah, we're all
or
gonna die.
commentary?
Yeah, I'm gonna
But
start off by saying
when?
we're all gonna die.
But when? But when? Give us when. Tell us when.
No, that's the nice thing. We don't have to worry about living. We just realize that we're gonna die, and we just do the best we can, right? No,
Yeah.
yeah, there's partial truth to that. But anyways, so from a geopolitical standpoint, I will say that my projections, most likely scenario, is that Putin got Stalined. By Stalined, I mean so he wanted Poland, he wanted that area, and he wanted to expand the Russian Empire, and so he made a deal with Germany, and then he was betrayed. So I think similar to that, Xi Jinping, yeah, Xi Jinping,
Xi
or
Jinping.
the CCP, whoever you want to say is in control of this nightmare we call China, kind of baited him. I think he thought he had more support than he had, so that if he did this, then he would have the international support, enough pressure from China trade wise upon Europe and America, that we would accede to it. But either China had no intention of actually backing them, or they decided that it wasn't worth backing them. They just left them out on a limb when Putin was not able to get in as quickly as he thought he was going to be able to. So these are just my thoughts about the probable causes of this. If that's the case, then I think that the Chinese are hoping to do a classic risk move where you have two enemies, you can't attack either of them, and one of them thinks that it can attack the other one, so it does, and you just wait and see who wins, and then you kill them. That's, I think, the most likely scenario is that if we have World War III, it'll actually be China that is the main aggressor, not Russia, because Russia will have already lost.
Wow. So depressing.
I know.
So let's do a fun one real quick. Do you think that if Trump was still the president, because I've heard this a lot, if Trump was still the president, that Putin would have done what he did? Just round table, and I'll give my take last. Let's start.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Thought you were asking me. I'm sorry. So the beautiful thing about Trump is that nobody knows what he's going to do. The thing I don't like about Trump is that nobody knows what he's going to do. So it's kind of very it's like Russian roulette. 1 in 6 will kill you, but the others are fine, and so you can make some good betting money. So anyways, I think that it is likely that Putin wouldn't have taken the risk. It's a very risky maneuver going into Ukraine. He knew that. He's not completely risk averse, but when you have a player like that that's so unpredictable, like the United States was under Trump, then I don't think he would have taken that risk. I think it would have been too much for him.
Dad?
I would agree with Matt. I think it would be a very different thing. I mean, whoever's in charge, their personality, their views and all. And Trump, for all his verbal abuse and different things that the media just went crazy over, was very effective in what he wanted to accomplish. He got things done. So I would think it'd be a different thing.
Paul?
All I'll say is that Trump and Putin is still a better love story than Twilight.
I agree.
Fair enough. Fair enough. My thoughts are, even though I don't think Trump really got a whole lot done as president, and
That's a weird thing to say.
I don't think he would be that effective as if he was still the president on if Putin would have still invaded. I don't think he would have done much different. I think verbally he would have, done much different, but been more, loud and, bravatas about it. But do I think that there's a higher chance that Putin would have not done it? I think, yeah, I think that Putin probably might have still done it. He might have stopped at the Donbass and the two, state regions and stopped, sort of done a Crimea thing, because, but I mean, I think that there's a chance. There are two things is like Putin, Trump was not very fond of NATO. And if Putin was like, hey, that's cool, but I don't see that anymore. I used to think that like, because Putin didn't, is fearful of NATO, then, I think that because Trump wasn't interested in expanding NATO, even though he did added another country to NATO, that, I think that Putin would have, was less worried about it. I think as Biden came back and sort of revitalized NATO, I think that did sort of tick him off a little bit, but I don't think that that's the end all be all. I don't think it really has a lot to do with NATO, like I did, and there's a variety of reasons for that. So I guess I still think that Putin might have invaded. I'd give it a 25% chance, though. I think it's more likely that he wouldn't have, or that he would have only done the Donbass region, whatever, and not fully invaded. But then again, we'll never know.
Well, the
but I
other
think
question would be is, had Biden handled Afghanistan better, would that have been a factor as well or not? I mean, does it play in?
Well, I think that
Oh,
there's
it
a lot of
absolutely plays in.
Biden hate, and I can't. I was actually happy that Biden pulled us out of Afghanistan. I think it's mostly the general's fault of how it happened and the intelligence community. And I think that's why I have such skepticism of what the intelligence community was telling us, because the intelligence community said that Kabul was going to be there 6 months later, for it to fall to the, Taliban or whatever. And then it fell in 24 hours. That was a failure of the intelligence community. And I don't fault Biden so much as the intelligence community when his generals are telling you, oh yeah, we got 6 months to get people out. All right, let's do this. And then it falls in 24 hours and you can't get anybody out. And then you actually staged one of the largest rescue operations in the history of the world on getting a lot of our supplies and things out. Biden actually, we don't give him a lot of credit for him. He left a lot of stuff behind because it was a disaster of a situation, because you have 20 years of a disaster and then it ended in disaster. I think that Biden did the right thing, and I'm not going to fault him for doing the right thing. So, but do I think that also is a factor? Yeah. I mean, Biden's like, yeah, okay, he pulled out of, Afghanistan, and I mean, Iraq, and, the American people are tired of war. So what better time? They just got out of war. The people don't want to go back to war. So this is a good time. But I do think that Trump probably would have pulled us out of Iraq too by now. I really do. I think that he would have done the same thing, and it probably would have been just as big a disaster, and the media would have made it a big to do. And Biden maybe would have said, Putin would have said, hey, their time is right. So I don't know. There's too many variables, and that's why it's a really bad question. And I want to throw it in because I love bad questions, and just to throw us off the rails for a minute. Anybody want to respond to that before I move to the next?
The thing that I love about Biden is also the thing I hate about Biden. He does exactly what he says he's going to do, which meant in this case that he telegraphed our retreat. So whenever you're like, okay, so yeah, I'm going to hit you right here. People move. So that was the thing. I think that was a terrible idea. I think that Trump would have handled that better, having dealt with a lot of business maneuvers that are similar. His business showmanship, or whatever you want to call that, whatever the acting thing is that makes businessmen good at what they do, would have covered that a lot better. But I appreciate in this particular case what he said that he would do as far as what America would do regarding Ukraine. We've done. It's not related to that, but I had something else to talk about, so I think I should let some others talk before I do that. Before I get us off the rabbit trail.
I think that Putin watches the United States very carefully. He probably has access to polling data, and so it's, and you can watch Western and specifically American news outlets pretty easily online. So it's not hard to get the idea that the American people are really tired of being at war.
Mm-hmm.
And add to that, you have this pullout that nobody on my side of the political spectrum is upset about the pullout. We just really think it was done really badly and in bad faith. And so, you have those two things together. Putin reading the tea leaves goes, take this, about at that peak spot where we can, I can step in and I can take as much of Ukraine as I want, and everybody will yell and scream, but nobody will do anything about it.
I think that's a miscalculation. I don't think Putin probably didn't expect us to sanction so deeply as we did. We shut down all banking in Russia. I don't know that and we were able to negotiate the Germans to shut down the Nord pipeline. That's a huge hit to Russia. I don't think
that
Russia actually do what?
That wasn't our doing. So as a democracy, the politicians follow what the people's mood is. Because Ukraine stood up so strongly, they were able to hold off, and they were actually able to give us some hope that these sanctions might actually do something. The Germans actually moving on behalf of the Ukrainians is just fantastic and unexpected, and that's 100% because of Ukraine, not because of America. We may have asked for it, but that's not the reason we got it. So,
guys, I'm gonna bow out. I'm gonna leave you all to it now. I'll check on it later. All right.
All right. I appreciate your input.
All righty. Bye bye.
Mm-hmm. So, in response to that, Matt, whoa, I had a whole thought, man. So you're saying about what was the essence of what you said? Recap what you just said for me real quick.
The reason that Germany and the other countries sanctioned so deeply, and the reason we were able to sanction so deeply, is because Ukraine held out and we knew what we were fighting for. So it's a response by public opinion.
Right. So my only thought on that is a miscalculation on Putin's part, but it is a response from the West. So I don't want to take that away from us. I mean, what can we do? We can tell the Germans what to do is right, and then the Germans did what was right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a win for us, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't see how that is not, a good thing. And so I think this is really going to hurt, Putin in the long run, much deeper than I think he expected at this point. So
my only point to clarify was not that he didn't do the right thing, but that it wasn't a courageous act. So there's leadership, and then there's following what other people are doing. And I think that's the difference I'm trying to say.
So you're saying that it's not leadership if we told the Germans you need to shut down this pipeline, and then they did it, even though they're responding to the same set of facts that we see? I mean, we're trying to respond So I've got a lot of beef with Biden, right? I don't think that he is a strong, leader by any measure, and I think that goes to the fact of why I think it's 75% more likely why Putin, invaded than if, say someone like Trump was in there, specifically because it was Biden. And I think what happened in Afghanistan, even though I don't necessarily fault Biden that much on it, I don't weigh that as much, but that is a factor. So, but I have a lot of beef with Biden, and I don't think he handles the inflation. I don't think he has any leadership on that front. I don't think he's doing very well in general on a lot of things. To say that he hasn't been working on this, and people forget that he was basically oversaw when he was under Obama administration. He actually oversaw Ukraine diplomatic relations with Ukraine. He's got a deep, long history with this country. You'll remember the Hunter Biden laptop and the Ukrainian oligarch story. Biden has a long history here, and with European politics, and so the American, just the being an American president and telling Germany you need to do something carries a lot of weight. It may not carry as much as it may be used to in the past or whatever, but I think the difference between Trump and Biden is trying to sanction, whereas I think Trump might have been like, hey, if you send one troop across the border, we're going to send a missile into one of these things sitting here on the border. You invade a sovereign country, we're going to shoot something out. We're going to shoot one target or something, proportional response. Every one soldier that crosses the border, one soldier on your side will get shot. Some sort of proportional, response, whatever. But it's more militarily. Now, would he go through with that? I don't know, but nor do I think he should. But I think he should threaten it, maybe. And the media would cry, that's crazy. Why are we doing this? And it is crazy. But you sometimes, to stop a crazy person, you might have to say something crazy, to the intimidation, strength, respect, strength type thing. So I guess, I don't know, maybe that's a very long way to answer that, but Paul, do you have any thought? Or go ahead.
Let me try to clarify that one last time. So there's such a thing as a difficult sale and an easy sale. An easy sale is when somebody already knows that they need something and you're just trying to say, hey, this is that thing. And the hard sell is when you have to really do some work to convince them. All I'm saying is he did the right thing. I give him credit for that, but it was not a hard thing to do, right? Because of Ukraine's actions. That's what I'm trying to say, Paul.
Yeah.
Biden certainly hasn't helped himself on a number of fronts, and those are easy to see and very public. And I think I think those things factor into Putin's calculation. So I don't really have much to add to that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we can move on. I just thought that, I try to play devil's advocate a little bit and try to give the credit where I thought it was due. But also sort of the larger point in all of this is I kind of agree at the end of the day. I don't think that it would have happened or it would have happened the same way. But, I don't necessarily even think that the way Biden is handling it has been that horrible, as things go. And, the best case scenario, Dad said, Ukraine would fall fast. I think that it's a little cynical. I mean, it hurts my heart to say that, for the people there. But I don't think that that's the best case scenario. In my mind, the best case scenario is they hold out long enough for those sanctions to set in and Russia feels the pinch economically and backs off. And, he only gets Donbass in the Lemesk region or whatever it was. So that would be to me the best case scenario, and it doesn't go to World War, sends NATO countries into invest in their own budgets, and then everything goes back, and then China makes the calculation, well, wow, if we invade Taiwan, they may not respond militarily, but they're going to cut us off from, the economic sanctions and everything. And that would be bad for us. And we don't want to be like Russia, crying in the corner after years of, economic hardship. That's a very, I don't think that's as likely as, well, I hope that, I don't know. I don't want to say likely anymore. I've just been so wrong on all of this. And there's just so much history that I have to look into before I can make good predictions. I made some bad ones because I didn't know as much history. So the last thing that I have is ideologically, and this kind of, you're touching on it earlier, Paul, with the West, ideologically, freedom, democracy, all of those things, and pushing NATO forward, and versus, I just want to have a conversation about NATO and its purpose in the next moving forward. What should NATO's purpose be? Does NATO have a purpose? Should we be supporting countries, on their path to democratization and freedom? Or, I don't know. This is a tough one for me, because I was listening to a gentleman who, and I think was talking about how Ukraine is, he supports Ukraine basically, joining NATO, and because the ideas and the, autocratic system of the Russian, Russian country is bad. He thinks that's bad. It's not good for the people, authoritarian regimes, and he likes democracy. So he's happy and supportive of that. He's the type of person that would want Ukraine to join the NATO alliance. And even if it threatens Putin, who cares? It's what's best for the people, his people as he sees it, And so as Americans, how do we about that? Because obviously we think that, that's mostly right, or what we, our system of government is better than their government system. And, obviously we want to support Ukraine, but we don't want to encroach on Russia's, sovereignty, but Ukraine isn't Russia. So can't sovereign nations decide for themselves? Like, how do you guys think about that? I don't know how to ask that question any better. Anybody?
Well, to read Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution. How does the United States respond? And then I want to touch on the values thing that you mentioned. The Congress shall have the power to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning the captures on land and water. So I'm going to be completely opposed to any military action that Congress doesn't authorize.
Right.
Any and all military action, all of it.
Yeah.
I still don't think we should be getting involved militarily, because it's we haven't been aggressed on. But on this is the you're referencing the guy that was talking about he wants Western values to be dominant. Is that right? The one? Okay. Yeah. Ideas so good that they have to be imposed at the point of a gun. There are some Western values I like, but also remember that war and violence are Western values. They're American values. There have been less than 50 years since 1776, where the United States has not, in some form or fashion, been involved in an armed conflict. Less than 50 years, probably less than 40. So I'm Western. That's what I was born. That's what I was raised in. And, there are Western values I like. There's some that I'm not as much of a fan of. I don't think they're good. And if we're not careful, I actually think we're past that point. But violence and war are such a part of our value system that
That's human values, though. It's in
yeah,
every single culture.
it is, but we're not divorced from that. And
Mhm.
there seems to be this idea that Western values are good and honorable and true. Well, some of them are, but some of them aren't. And the way that we um, populate those values around the world a lot of times is at the point of a gun. I'm sorry, but I think the more that we think that we can nation build our way out of global conflict, the more we think we can impose our values at the point of a gun through war and military action. More war and military action we're going to have to deal with. And I don't think it's going to solve anything.
I don't necessarily know that other Russia is imposing its values on other countries. China wants to impose its values on
Mm-hmm.
other countries. Every country does that, and to say that we shouldn't and sit back is fine. I think it's a valid position, but I like this conversation because it makes me think really hard about what is sovereignty, what is national sovereignty, what is nationalism, borders. I mean, do we help our neighbors in need? When do we help our neighbors in need? Who is my neighbor? you know, who
Jesus was
I
talking to individuals, not to governments.
Right.
right, and that's fair. But when I see somebody suffering in Ukraine on the other side of the world, my heart hurts,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to help, but which battles are our battles? And I agree that this is not our war to fight. We support NATO, and I say all those things. And there was that, I think it was that same guy who said, I think he said his wife said we should do something about it. He's like, well,
Yeah.
the fighting is. She's like, no, but somebody should, and it's that thing. It's like, if not us, then who? Okay,
Yeah.
I get it, but it becomes really. I guess I'm saying I understand the impulses, and my ultimate end of the day goes, okay, so what happens when do we just not do anything until we're attacked? I mean, like Pearl Harbor, do we not get involved in World War
Well,
II until someone attacks us, and then we
well,
do? I don't know.
um, I'd say get us out of NATO and let NATO fall on its own immorality, because it's NATO's an opportunity to saber rattle, and NATO's a direct ignoring George Washington's warning in his farewell address to the nation: beware political entanglements which so easily ensnare. It also ignores Eisenhower's warning at the end of World War II: watch out for the military-industrial complex; they will take you over. And NATO is just an extension of the military-industrial complex. I think not all, but part of the problem is the saber rattling that NATO's done in 10 years. Here, let's add some more bases, and let's add more countries to NATO. And there's this great meme that I've seen on Facebook. It's Iraq and an Iraq flag on it's a map, and it's got Iraq and an Iraq flag, and then around that are like 40 or 50 different American bases outside of Iraq, just surrounding it. Why? And the meme says, what is it with these people? Why are they trying to um, come around and invade our country? And it's the U.S. asking this. The United States has got all these bases and guns and stuff pointed. Countries trying to invade us. Well, it's us doing the invading. Um, um, I do want to read part of a statement from the Russian Libertarian Party on how to respond to Russia, how to respond to, or how they would like the world to respond to the attack on the Ukraine. And then I'll be as quick as I can. We understand the inevitable consequence brought upon us by this war and support all efforts to stop it, including broad and harsh sanctions against the persons responsible. Putin and his cronies must be proscribed from setting foot on any free nation's soil. Their money must be found and frozen. The property they gain by corruption must be arrested everywhere in the world. Businesses owned and operated by them, even as quasi-private companies, must be sanctioned as well. We not only understand it, but we welcome it. One thing we warn foreign decision makers against is collectivist approaches to sanctions. The Russian people as a whole are not responsible for this atrocity and do not condone it. This is being perpetrated by individuals. We ask that the blame and punishment be meted out individually as well. For example, Belgium's asylum Reuters, at the moment, Russians, all of them, are not welcome here. A general visa ban for Russia should not be a taboo. We humbly ask all friends of liberty to urge their governments to abstain from enacting such indiscriminate sanctions. This is a page from the Cold War Communist Playbook. Don't raise an iron curtain against us. Do not rebuild the Berlin Wall. To do so would only discourage support for peace and foster enmity and oppression. The Russian people don't deserve to be collectively punished for our tyrants' inhumanity. Please find ways to allow individuals to travel to promote peace, cultural exchange, and cooperation. And then the last thing, we call on all friends of liberty around the world, libertarian parties, movements, foundations, and individuals to stand behind us in condemnation of this aggression. A moment has come for all people to unite against what may be the worst tragedy of this century. And right now, as always, peace is our best hope.
Yeah, I mean, I like that, and I think that right now, I think that we are targeting the sanctions. We're trying to avoid private or any sanctions that affect the people of Russia,
which is a good thing. It's a little different for sanctions being levied around the world, but it's
just really
nice
hard. It is very hard to do that. It is very hard to do that. About the sanctions on Russian people and trying to target it to just the oligarchs and Putin and his government and not the Russian people. And I was saying I appreciate Biden for these targeted sanctions and not trying to punish all the Russian people. But I was saying that there are people in government right now that want to target all of Russia. And the idea behind that is if you make the people suffer along with the Russian government, that the people will uprise against, people that might be more neutral, like, oh, Putin's just doing this, but, I'm sort of on the fence, that now that affects them. And so they're going to uprise against Putin and it'll help, him stop the war. And I think that would just create bitterness. I see where they're coming from as far as the idea that makes sense, but I also think that will create a level of bitterness. And I think that Putin's going to fail on his own without hurting the people of Russia. That's where with the population of Russia at large, that's my thoughts on that. So I'm glad you brought that into the conversation because I think that is important. So any other parting thoughts? There was something else I had thought that I wanted to talk about and get into a little bit, but it escapes me now. But if you guys have any parting thoughts on this episode.
Yeah. The biggest thing that is going to affect the war is whether or not the people or how the people of both countries respond, and that's been the big surprise so far. So that's what I'm praying about, is the response of the church, because there's a tremendous opportunity for Christians to be Christians in the Ukraine, and there's a tremendous opportunity for Christians to be Christians in Russia. There are not probably a huge number of believers in Russia, but the ones that are there can affect loving their neighbor well. How that's going to look for the Ukrainians versus the Russians may be very different. They're in a very different context, but that's what I want to pray for, them to have the strength to be able to do that, so that it's not just stories on the news about people saying go F yourselves, but it's also Christians who are loving soldiers who are different than them, whether it be through wounded soldiers, Russian soldiers being treated well by Ukrainian Christians. Like, those kind of things make a difference. And that could be, I think the big story here is that Ukrainian Christians get to be Christians. And I think as we go into times of economic distress in the United States, then we're going to have opportunities for Christians here to be Christians as well. So the big story to me is not whether people rise and fall. It could be that Putin is assassinated by his own people here in a little while. There was a king that was sieging Jerusalem when Hezekiah was king. I don't remember his name anymore, but he was so certain that he was going to win. But then he heard trouble and he went back to his home country and he was assassinated by his own son. So these types of political things happen all the time. There's always been wars and rumors of wars. There's always been the potential for humans to just annihilate each other and wipe each other out and cause plagues and all kinds of craziness. There's always been an opportunity, but there's always the opportunity to be faithful in what you are doing and what you're called to do, listening to God's voice.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought about doing a question talking about what could have prevented the war, but I kind of strayed away from that because I thought we might just get too crazy. But it's like the whole killing Hitler as a baby, that could have stopped World War II. Just the time travel back in time and killing him as a baby. Like we do that to Putin, and yeah. When you said assassination, I thought of that. But
there was a woman who wrote a poem about how if she had been Putin's mother, he would have been loved. And it's hilarious because she thinks that he was unloved, and basically she's kind of bagging on Putin's mother when you think about it, because she thinks she can do so much of a better job. But the thing about it is that there's an element of truth to that, and there's an element of a lie. The lie is that she could have done it, that she could have done a better job. The truth is that as a Christian in a Christian home, one that's actually following Christ, he would not have turned out the way that he did. Whether or not he was a Christian, I don't think he would have turned out anything like he is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Paul. Looked like you were going to say something.
I just had a couple of final things piggybacking off of Matt. So,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And then after that, I got to exit because work calls. Matt mentioned the church's response, and I ran across a quote from somebody by the name of Dragos Herscu. I think I've pronounced that right. He's the head of the Institute for Orthodox Christian Studies. And he said 2 days ago, this Sunday in the Orthodox Church is the Sunday of Last Judgment. And he references Matthew 25. It's an excellent time for the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, to remind the atomic bully Putin that Christ is suffering in every Ukrainian man, woman, and child running for their lives, or wounded or mourning because of Putin. Otherwise, the Russian Orthodox Church is de facto complicit in this absurd war, and all that's left of the Orthodox Church in Russia is now empty ritual pageantry bereft of Christ's love and mercy. You cannot commune with Christ in the chalice while simultaneously running him over with tanks. So in at a large scale, the church, there's a church that's saying, can't have this. We can't tolerate this. We can't support this. We have to speak against this. And then I will leave with this quote from Yaroslav Pais. I think I've pronounced that right. He is the Ukrainian Baptist Theological Seminary president. And of the church, he says the church will go underground. We had that under the Soviet Union. The church didn't forget what it meant to be persecuted. We will rearrange, reorganize, and do what we always do, preach the gospel. So, and with that, gentlemen, I've got to go because I have to work.
All right, sir.
So,
Thank you for your
see
comments.
you later. Yep. Bye.
All right. Matt, so we'll wrap the episode up here, with just my parting final thoughts. I think that, in light of being so wrong this last week and trying to come to this conversation with a sense of humility and with just a presentation of how this could go in many different directions, right? It could go really, really bad, or it could go really, really, well. And I think that we've laid that out in this episode, at least to a certain extent, the best that we can. There's probably a third scenario that we can't even imagine right now because there's a lot of complexities. And I think that's something we talked about before this episode, to me and you, was how, there is a certain amount of every country is going to respond differently. And there's always groups and coalitions within each country that will respond differently than the government will. And so, just as the American people have responded, mostly uniformly, in support of Ukraine, sending troops and sanctions, but not, military, actual, troops into harm's way on Ukrainian soil. That all could change. And with the different set of circumstances in front of us, and what those circumstances are. I mean, certainly if United States is attacked at some point, and that's something that we didn't really talk about on this episode, that because I just don't see it as a possibility, but I think that sometimes when you don't, it's like nobody saw the financial crash coming or whatever of 2008, whatever, because, you're prideful and, you're all leveraged out and you just think it can go on, and we'll do an episode at some point on talking about, the monetary policy. But in this case, I think I'm just trying to have a little humility on, I don't know what's going to happen, but if these certain different, likelihoods play out, what I think might happen. But the one possibility that we didn't explore is something that I just want to part on, is if America is attacked, what would happen? And I think that we would probably all be pretty united, and it would be a bloody, disastrous nuclear war, and it would just be absolutely crushing to the world. And I don't want to see that. So, but I think we're painting all scenarios. I think that that's one that, I guess is on the cards, and I'd probably give that a 3% chance of happening. Again, I'm kind of 50-50 with the other two, scenarios that we laid out, as far as like, whether this all boils down. And, but final thought is, ball's in Putin's court, and who is Putin, and that is going to tell us a lot, and we're going to find out in the next couple weeks. And I hope that our leaders in Washington, at least here in the United States, and people in Europe and around the world are are wise and make wise decisions and continue to do the things that they um, have been doing. I don't think that anybody's done a particularly bad job so far, and you know, but there's a certain level of anxiety that I feel that I don't know that we've necessarily captured in this episode
Mhm.
about just the because it's so hypothetical, which is fine, but there is a certain level of anxiety that I have and about the future of what could happen in the next couple weeks. But I think if we can survive the next couple weeks, I think that maybe things can get better.
There's two extremes that are equally deadly: high anxiety and a cavalier attitude. And I want to fall in the middle of those two, as close
Right.
to the middle as I can get, because there's a lot of people who've taken a cavalier attitude towards what happens in Europe and so far away, and it's not America's problem. And that is foolish. And there's a good number of people who are living in existential dread at this moment. A lot of people in my generation, I have a coworker that I talked to yesterday who has been basically addicted to all of the terrible news coming in about war, because that's not something she's seen in her lifetime. She's 18. So, I mean, it's foolish to live in either one, but it's totally understandable. I can understand the people that are cavalier about it because it's not our war, not our problem, and I can understand the ones who are living in fear that we're going to end up in World War III and the world's going to get nuked. But either one of those is borrowing tomorrow's problems. So while it's good to make predictions to kind of think ahead, you also want to avoid borrowing tomorrow's anxieties and making them today's problem
Right.
as well.
Maybe
So
maybe I was
yeah.
painting it dramatic terms for the sake of being provocative because I don't live in anxiety, but
No, but
I do think that there's a certain level of like heightened awareness that
yeah,
I'm walking in,
me
and
as well.
but I think that there's, like you said, like we've stated probably 100 times in this episode, just this level of humility that I have to have going into this. There are more variables than I imagined, and probably next week we'll be introduced to a bunch more variables that we didn't know.
Mhm.
And instead of becoming clearer, this might become a lot more foggy, and
We're getting
that's
really
kind of
good.
gives me
We're getting really good
pause.
at jazz, playing it by ear, because
Yeah,
that's all you
gonna
can
have
do.
to. So, all right. Well, we've lost two people, and we are been going for a while. So we're going to stop this deep dive right here. It has been a pleasure to do this, and I really enjoy this channel, and I really enjoy talking about politics and current events and things with the panels. And if you have any comments, I would love your comments on these things. Tell us we're crazy. Tell us that this opinion is off base and why. That would be really fun. And then also, tell us, your interaction would be really good for this channel. I think the more interactions would be great. So yeah, thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we will see you next week here on the Johnny Random Show.